Mr. P, if somehow this video gets to you, I have only one request. Please, do not reply, VeryDarkMan. Don't do it. Not because you cannot answer him. Not because you are afraid of him. And definitely not because everything he has said should simply be accepted. Don't reply because sometimes the biggest mistake you can make when telling your own story is allowing somebody who was never originally part of that story to suddenly become the main character. And that is exactly what I believe is beginning to happen here. I have watched Peter Okoye explain his side of the P-Square story. I have followed the reactions. I have watched VDM enter the conversation. I have seen people telling Peter not to respond. I have seen the old WhatsApp chats being displayed. I have seen the woman who later came forward, explaining why she says Peter was trying to reach VDM. And after looking at everything, I have one question. How did a story about Peter, Paul, and Jude suddenly become Peter versus VeryDarkMan? That is the distraction we need to talk about. And before anybody misunderstands me, let me make something very clear. I am a Mr. P supporter. I believe Peter deserves the opportunity to tell his own story. I am not pretending to be neutral, but supporting Peter does not mean inventing facts. Anything that remains an allegation should remain an allegation until independently proven. What I am interested in today is something much simpler. Does VDM's response actually answer Peter's story, or has it simply created another controversy around VDM himself? Let's talk. Years, Nigerians have watched the P-Square family disagreement from outside. Peter, Paul, Jude, marriage, management, money, music, family loyalty, business disagreements, reconciliation, another separation. Accusations, counter-accusations. There has always been one major problem. Public has never been inside that family. Weren't sitting inside their meetings. Weren't present when contracts were signed. Weren't inside their homes when arguments happened. So, eventually, each person involved has to be allowed to tell his own version. And Peter has now decided to do exactly that. He came forward with a lengthy series laying out his version of events. That does not automatically mean every allegation has been judicially established, but it is his testimony about his experience. And if Paul disagrees, Paul can speak. If Jude disagrees, Jude can speak. They are adults. They have platforms. They have voices. They have access to the media. Nobody is stopping anybody from responding. So why should Peter telling his story suddenly become a problem? And then VeryDarkMan entered the conversation. Now, let me be fair. Peter made his story public. Once something becomes public, anybody can comment on it. VDM has the right to analyze it. I have the right to analyze it. You watching this video have the right to analyze it. That isn't my problem. My problem begins when a commentator starts appearing less like somebody commenting from outside and more like somebody positioning himself as the referee of somebody else's family history. VDM questioned Peter's account and said he had communicated with people involved in the wider controversy. Eventually, the pressure became so intense that reports said VDM announced he was stepping away from the P-Square family dispute. And VDM wasn't receiving criticism from only random, anonymous accounts. Actor Frank Artis publicly advised him to stay away from the Okoye family dispute. Media. Personality Radio Gad was also reported as questioning whether VDM had actually produced concrete evidence for some of the position he was taking. Tosin. Silverdam publicly told Peter not to reply to VDM. Think about that. People weren't necessarily saying VDM wasn't allowed to have an opinion. They were asking, why are you becoming so deeply involved in another family's dispute? And I think that is a legitimate question. Now this is where things became particularly interesting to me. People started telling Peter, don't reply VDM. And VDM responded by displaying WhatsApp communications and saying that he had stopped responding to Peter because, according to him, he believed Peter wanted to use him. VDM publicly maintained that Peter had approached him and that he eventually stopped replying. Fine, let's assume the chat is authentic. But there is something viewers immediately noticed. That communication was not presented as a brand new August 2026 conversation. Material circulating around the controversy relates to communication from the previous period. And VDM himself was saying Peter had already discussed aspects of the family matter with him more than a year earlier. And this is where I need people to separate two different questions. An old WhatsApp chat can prove that two people communicated. But does it automatically prove why somebody communicated with you? No. Does it automatically prove their motive? No. Does it automatically prove what happened between both people afterwards? No. Does it automatically settle an entirely separate family dispute? Again, no. So when somebody shows me an old conversation, my next question isn't, wow, screenshot, case closed. My next question is, what exactly does this screenshot prove? Because evidence must answer the question you are asking. If your claim is, Peter contacted me, fine. A chat may help establish contact, but if your claim becomes, Peter wanted to use me, now you are talking about Peter's motive. And motive requires more explanation. But there is something else about VDM's response that I believe deserves serious attention. Phyno. Yes, Phyno. And this is where I really started asking questions. Because go back and listen carefully to Peter Okoye's public story. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, all the way through his concluding episodes. Peter was publicly explaining his problems with his brothers, his family, management, money, his marriage, and what he says happened behind the scenes. But Peter did not publicly build his story around Phyno. So how did Phyno suddenly become one of the biggest names being discussed in VDM's response? Think about that. VDM says that during a private conversation he previously had with Peter, Peter allegedly told him that Jude had also wronged Phyno financially, and that Phyno could potentially be a witness. VDM then says that when he later encountered Phyno, he brought the matter up with him. According to VDM's own account, Phyno was surprised by what he was hearing and denied the version VDM says Peter had given him. Now stop there. Because before we even decide who was telling the truth in that alleged private conversation, I have a completely different question. Why was Phyno's name brought into the public discussion in the first place? Peter didn't make a public video saying, Phyno, come and explain yourself. Peter didn't make Phyno the center of his parts 1 through 8. It was VDM who publicly revealed what he says. Peter had told him privately. And that distinction matters. Because imagine that somebody sits down with you privately. You discuss your problems. You mention different people. You show documents. You explain what you believe happened. Then more than a year later, there is a public controversy. And that person starts taking names from your private conversation and introducing those people into a public argument. At what point do we begin talking about confidentiality? At what point do we ask whether everything somebody tells you privately should automatically become material for your next social media video?
Because Peter's public story and Peter's alleged private conversation with VDM are two different things. That is extremely important. If Peter deliberately left Phyno's name out of his public videos, perhaps there was a reason. Mun protected, didn't want to involve him. Maybe he didn't believe it was necessary.